quite have the resources of our national compatriot, but we try to do what we can. We make up for it by that we have very educated, passionate volunteers, very informed about programming, the law, activism, etc. And we just try to educate citizens on what are these complex issues new technologies are raising, and try to, help people understand what we think would make for sound policy on these issues based on how they actually work. Because a lot of lawmakers don't know how this new tech actually works, and so they propose bad laws. So currently our main thing is we have the monthly meetups, which are the second Tuesday of every month at 7 p.m. here at Capitol Factory in this room. Tell your friends. And we're on, we have our own website, EFFAustin.org. We're also on Meetup, Facebook, Twitter, Mastodon. We're technically on Instagram, though I never update it. We also have a mailing list that mostly just gets announcements about these meetups. But yeah, so you can find us on a lot of stuff. And you should reach out and get involved. We basically do what the community volunteers its time and effort to do. The meetups are our main thing. We also, though, occasionally do a bit of political advocacy. We've also been known to occasionally throw pretty cool cyberpunk parties when we can find enough money to do so. So a couple announcements about some events we have coming up. We're trying currently to figure out what we will be doing in March. We have a number of things potentially in the air. One thing that is definitely happening in some form you should look forward to is that our very good dear friend, the famous digital civil liberties activist, blogger, and science fiction writer Cory Doctorow is going to be in town for South by Southwest. He's going to be giving a talk at the UT School of Law, and we're going to be having an official EFF Austin meetup there to gather, hang with him a bit, and hear his talk. So if you've never read Cory's writings or heard him speak, he's one of those people that you meet and you immediately realize you're in the presence of somebody who is much, much, much smarter than you, but he's very nice and humble to boot, which is even rarer. So if you've never heard him speak, I strongly encourage you to attend. His talks are not to be missed. They are rabble-rousing, but in an intelligent way based in reality. Running Wolf and Carolina Old Coyote second. They do some very cool augmented reality work and also some AI work around indigenous language translation. It's very cool stuff. They were also at Standing Rock and can tell you a lot of fun stories about the government surveillance of the protesters. So also very interesting people I encourage you to meet. Finally, we normally don't have a March meetup at Capitol Factory because they're busy with South by Southwest stuff. I have been informed that we will have the option to potentially have a March meetup later in the month. I have not fully figured out the time and date that will be. It will not be on the second Tuesday. It will be a one-off on some other date. Check our channels for information. I'm not 100% sure who the speaker will be, but since it's last second, there's actually a very decent chance the speaker will be me, because I will be educating you on a local political advocacy issue we've been doing a lot of work on related to Austin's automated license plate reader policies, basically. Basically, I'm going to give you a talk about what are automated license plate readers, why they're terrible from a digital civil liberties perspective, and give you a little rundown about what Austin's current policies on this are, how the fight to try to get reform played out, where current members of the city council sit on this issue, and how you can potentially help us actually get it to not come back in September, because one thing we did win from Mayor Adler, how APD can use police body cameras, which is something we support them in theory, but not the way cops often actually use them. So we strongly support it. There is some crazy stuff going on, and there's early enough registered to speak and talk more about this issue. I will let Kathy intro that, since she's one of the main people leading this fight, before she gets into her main talk. And I guess just to
I'm going to flip this. Yeah. I'm going to go to that last.
Okay, you'll go to that last. Then also I'll just say, now to introduce my speaker.
I was here to talk about.
Yes, I'll intro Kathy and what she's actually here to talk about, which is, so Kathy Mitchell is, in addition to just being an incredible, because we did not love her abilities, she's just so amazing, everybody needs her, and she can only be in so many places at once. But yes, she's a former board member of ours. She is an expert about just how to navigate city and state level politics as far as the bills, the political alliances and craziness that happen around them. And she's just very good at researching and keeping an eye on what's happening at the city and state level. And so, the ledge is in session. And basically, I've now started a tradition where every 2 years when the ledge is in session, I ask Kathy to come speak to us sometime in January, February about bills before the ledge related to digital civil liberties issues. Because even I, with my bandwidth is only so much, often stuff is happening that even I have no idea until I hear about it. And it's usually not good, So I'm going to have Kathy tell us a bit about what she's researched about what the ledge is proposing in our space, just how bad is it, and what, if anything, we can do to contact our lawmakers to make it less bad. So without further ado, take it away, Kathy.
So but
Might have been Corey, but that applies to you as well.
I would flip that on its head when talking about the Texas legislature. We have a lot of rabble-rousing happening right now, and there's a great deal of performance art in what's been filed and what may or may not move. And I want to highlight something that I think is sort of like the perfect example. As you all, I'm sure, know far better than me, not very long ago, TikTok released its plan for how it was going to have a company in the U.S. and address all of the concerns that people have raised. And they named that plan, somewhat inexplicably, Texas Project. So
that tells me a lot.
That's horrible. There are many possible theoretical reasons why they might name their effort to have a company in the U.S. the Texas Project. But they haven't actually explained that.
Any possible explanation is possibly even worse than my imagination is what's.
Well, I find the whole thing very entertaining because lawmakers at the Texas legislature, of course, have no more information about why TikTok is calling their U.S. thing the Texas Project, but they're not having it. So I want to start my talk with just to mention a bill, House Bill 2206 by Patterson, prohibits, and this would have been filed fairly recently, social platforms provided by foreign entities. And it's a very short bill, and it's explicitly intended, clearly, to say Texas is not going to take your project, even though we don't know what they're doing or what they're asking for or whether it's good or really much of anything about it. And that is how a lot of legislation happens. So a lot of the bills that you'll see filed right now are largely positioning bills. And they're positioning for some goal that is probably electoral. It can be the goal of that individual lawmaker. They need something to, show their voters. This is not how it used to be. I've been working on advocating for legislation for my whole life now, it seems like. And there was a time when it was a more serious endeavor. I'll be honest. It's become something less serious in recent years. So to that point, I'm going to run through very quickly some of the big topics on which there are, almost countless bills filed. And then we'll boil down to a handful of things that are more serious, maybe, although that is still in the cards. The first thing to know about the Texas legislature is that none of them know anything about tech. I'm sort of a dabbler, and I kind of know what a few of the words mean. But
you know way more than the average citizen.
The lawmakers don't really know anything, and the agencies that they are trying to supervise and regulate generally know even less. So, and some of this goes back to the statutes. So I remember when the big fight at the Texas legislature was whether or not agencies could notify people by this magic new tool called email, or if they had to continue to send things in mail, like paper in snail mail. So in, 20 years ago, they wrote a statute that expanded snail mail notices to include email. Well, here we are, 20 years later, and nobody wants to exchange information by email because we have shared servers. Like, people can just log in to a server and get everything they need. Well, that's actually not allowed under many statutes that allow only email notice after that was a big thing back in the day. So there are several bills that I would put in the good bill packet, people who are trying to be serious about government and actually solve problems that would simply, that I know, those people do exist. So there are some bills to create digital shared file systems that agencies can use. Like, that seems like we shouldn't need a bill for that, but when you look at the statute, you can see that we actually do. They had to create a pilot for the housing authority to be able to allow people to donate to housing charities if they wanted to help the homeless. So these are things that on the for-profit side, the problem is sort of the reverse, right? People can almost start anything, and until somebody tells you to stop, you can do it. In the government side, almost nothing can be done until something is actually authorized. So every session, we're sort of incrementally trying to problem solve, like tiny things like TDHCA can't accept donations, even though they work with charitable partners. So all of those kind of things are likely to move. They're called performance art. Not because I do or don't believe in these issues. It almost doesn't matter, but because these sets of bills are designed to allow the two parties to create political tent poles around which they galvanize their base. So on the Democratic side, and you'll notice, I noticed, that only Democrats have filed these bills. There are many, many bills about electronic voting. Electronic voting access, electronic voting registration, digital ways to transmit vote, what do you call it when you...
Curing a ballot.
Curing a ballot, voting when you can't vote when you can't
Absentee
be absentee.
ballots,
Thank you. I'm having brain death. Absentee voting. So there are a set of bills. There's more than a dozen already, and there's likely to be more. They're all filed by Democrats, and they're all about ballot access. And I would probably find most of them perfectly harmless. I would bet that none of them have a chance, because that is the Democrats' tentpole issue coming into the next presidential election. So we do have a Republican-controlled legislature, so the chances that Democrats are going to pass ballot reform, no matter how cleverly done, is very low.
The only thing that I would be like red flag would, whichever party was doing it, would be if there's any bill about letting people vote online, which is a horrible, horrible idea.
Yeah, no, I don't think there are any of those. It's all more process oriented. So meanwhile, on the other side of the aisle, so to speak, there are a remarkable number of bills basically trying to control what children see on the internet.
So standard Republican stuff?
Again, tentpole issue. There is a bill to simply prohibit children from using social media. And by children, they mean up to the age of 18. So presumably, you can go to war, you can drive a car, but you can't, get on TikTok or Facebook.
Wow.
Yeah. There are bills to prohibit social platform algorithms from targeting minors. I'm not exactly sure how they would actually accomplish that, given that everybody targets everybody with I'm not sure what AI is for if it's not targeting people. There's an expansion of the definition of harmful material in the criminal code.
Specifically CSAM, or is this more general than that?
CSAM, I don't...
Child pornography.
Yes,
It's the fancy
yeah,
term.
it's for children. We're all about the children.
Mm-hmm.
And my favorite one is a bill that causes a social media platform to be given a state jail felony consequence for having allowed children to see salient material? Salacious material. Thank you. Salient is like actually accurate.
And does this bill possibly talk about how you would possibly enforce
I'm
something
not
that
right.
impossible
Well,
to
I'm not right.
enforce?
I'm not sure how. It doesn't explain like which body of human at the tech company is supposed to sit in the state jail cell for the period of this, consequence. Everybody always talks about the Texas regulatory environment, right? We're supposed to be the state that has the best regulatory environment. We're drawing businesses. And that is to some extent true. But the way that Texas handles regulatory issues, unfortunately, is in our criminal laws. So this member who filed a bill to give a tech company a state jail felony, incomprehensible as that is to all of us who live in the real world, is simply following how Texas does things. So for example, Texas has, we always laugh about this, 11 oyster felonies. So our regulation of the oyster beds in Galveston Bay is entirely codified in criminal laws. We don't have a regulatory system. We have a whole host of crimes for various things that you can do with an oyster. It is ridiculous.
Well, this isn't even getting into, I used to work at the Texas Legislative Council. This isn't even getting into the insanity that is the Texas Constitution and our statutory codes and how to do anything, you've got to amend it.
Right.
So
Yes, sir.
what is the perspective that, are they just following what they've done, or is there another perspective that's guiding this use
Right.
of criminality
Yes.
for regulation, or avoidance of criminality?
Well, it's not an avoidance, right. So it's an avoidance of speaking about regulation. So in the end,
All right,
right,
you say we don't regulate.
That's
but
right.
We'll throw you in jail.
in the end, the problem is our inability to wrestle down to the, to the ground what are truly simply regulatory issues.
I
So,
guess the question I have for you is,
yeah.
is this purely a semantic difference that we are regulating, we're just calling it criminal penalties, or is it a practical difference, and hence why things in Texas are
Well,
Texas?
So I'll give you another example that's real easy to understand. About half of states have a civil system for processing traffic violations. So if you went and ran a stop sign in New Mexico, this is not a criminal law violation. You still get a ticket. It looks a lot the same, but it's more like, well, Texas truly does have less of that. But when we hit a moment when we need to say, don't do that thing, don't show pornography to children, social media company, you figure out how to not do it, but if you do it, what? Somebody's gonna go to jail? Who exactly? Right? I mean, that becomes a very difficult problem.
And does that person who's going to jail even live in Texas? Because the internet's not confined to Texas.
Well, exactly. No, I know.
And a lot of those.
That bill is not going anywhere, but I use it as an example because we are in this moment of these tentpole issues where the two parties are putting up a lot of legislation that's probably not going to go anywhere. The Republican Party's legislation has more chance than the other. But these are more about the ideology and appealing to the base in the next election. And so standing on that issue that we're the deregulatory state, even in the face of their own people wanting us to regulate something. So you have a lot of incoherent bills, I'll be honest, and I suppose I'm saying this on...
It's that other person's incoherent.
It's right, exactly. So I will say, after all that, let's come back to what is real. Gio Capriglione has filed a number of bills that actually are intended to address real problems
And just to confirm what I was telling you earlier, Kathy, that the person who may be watching from Dallas, yes, it is Capriglione's bill.
Good. So Capriglione actually has a number of good bills. I would say that so far, my review of what has so far been filed, he is the only member who's legitimately trying to address one of what I think of as the biggest technology problem that we've had in Texas since last session, and that is the massive data breaches. So our state agencies, primarily the Department of Insurance, that lost more than something like 2 million personal data files with
They were erased, taken, or they were just copied?
No, they were hacked.
Basically, the files, the copies of them were hacked and put on the dark web.
All right,
so
all right.
the highest
Oh
security.
yes, and that is what's been happening. So there are hackers who have been hacking our state agencies because their security is not good. Because the
Besides-
Department of Insurance probably doesn't even have a data security person. Like it's very likely that they're still coding in, I don't know, C or Cobalt. Yes.
I mean, it depends on the department. I can tell you that as of 5 years ago, the Texas Comptroller was still on a mainframe.
There you go. So we have a variety of giant agencies that have been routinely collecting personal information from people. The big hacks in the last year were DPS and the Department of Insurance, but there have been many others.
And a side note, I'll just say, there was a big one that hacked the city of Austin's network because of a tech company that lives here. You might have heard of Solar Winds. They're literally like 2 miles from my house, their headquarters.
Right. So this is all going to sound like baby steps, but going back to my opening where we talked about, they had to add email by statute to be able to do anything. Capriglione is making a legitimate effort to get started with what is going to be a very long-term and probably very expensive process of actually securing data that is held by the state. We are not doing a good job of that right now, and my personal view is if I could avoid giving data to the state simply on privacy grounds, I would.
Unfortunately, a lot of Republicans would be right there with you on that.
Well, and Capriglione is a Republican, absolutely. And like I say, I am being very clear with you that there are bills that are tentpole bills that are about the next election cycle, and there are some bills that are legitimately an effort to solve problems. And when you are in charge of government, as the Republicans currently are, we would very much hope that they try to solve some problems. So Capriglione has several bills. I'm going to have to take my glasses off because I can't read and talk at the same time. He has a bill to create a chief privacy officer at the Department of Information Resources. I know that's going to sound so boring and unimportant. But the way that state agency tech systems work is that most of them have to go through this agency called DIR in order to purchase and use technology, Department of Information Resources. The idea that now here in 2023 that agency is finally getting a security guy is kind of a statement, right? So,
Which department is that again?
DIR.
Department of Information Resources. So,
The guy who sells every other agency their technology, that department.
yeah, exactly. So that bill has been filed in the House and the Senate. I very much hope that it moves. He has a bill for the state agencies to start doing security assessments. I'm fairly certain that the insurance department, after its fiasco in 2022, has probably started that process. But most agencies may not even know that that happened, right? They don't have people who sit around going, I wonder how secure our systems are.
I mean, I did, but I didn't have enough power when I worked at the Ledge Council, and they're actually not one of the agencies who's bad. They're the only one that give money to actually have modern tech.
Right. So there are 3 bills to address that, a couple in the Senate, and then Capriglione's bill in the House. They're all a little bit different, but they're all headed in the right direction, and they'll no doubt merge. It's okay. Capriglione, again, has a bill for requiring state employees who handle data to get security training. Again, reminding us, we're at the beginning of what is going to be a very long process. It's very clear that our agencies have not been prioritizing this, and we have to. Capriglione has a bill to notify the AG of a security breach at a state agency. Now, as you know, federal law requires anyone who holds personal data to report a security breach to the people, right? But there isn't any, to my knowledge, before this, requirement that anyone in Texas actually know about all the security breaches.
I can at least tell you that there isn't currently a legal requirement to report if you have been subject to a ransomware attack. I can tell you that there is a lot of debate about whether it should be legally required, and there's actually a very interesting ethical rabbit hole that's not cut and dry as one might think. But
Well, that might
may have
be-
changed, I don't know.
Well, I would suggest that that's a conversation that you should take to Capriglione's office, and I'm sure that they're open to it. I think that their goal, and again, you know, I'm just reading the bills, and I plan to spend some time in that office as well. But I think it's clear that somebody knowing what security breaches there have been would probably be helpful for the state policymakers, and I think that's more of his perspective. And I'm aware of a few smaller breaches at state agencies that probably didn't get a lot of attention, yeah.
Are these just breaches that they have detected or have discovered for sale on the dark net?
Some of them, the data was discovered for sale on the darknet. I don't know about all of it. Yeah, no, they have proven, the Department of Public Safety breaches, the data was found.
So they
In
didn't
the
know
hands
until
of-
it was found.
And they had, I don't remember the order of operation. And in the insurance one, the insurance department breach, that was one of those where, you know, the first notification said, oh, it didn't apply to that many people. Then the next notification said, oh, it may have applied to a lot more people. And then like the next time they're talking about it, it's like 1.8 million people.
I can also tell you it's just pretty sadly, shockingly common that, you know, both public and private sector entities do not learn they were hacked. You know, they don't necessarily learn because they found the data on the dark net, but they don't learn sometimes till months after it happened because they either have an audit done or one of their systems that should have been automatic, they finally ran it, it was manual and detected that there had been access from an IP address, so it's just very common.
All right.
But in fairness, security's hard. It's very hard.
Yeah, security is hard, which is why, unfortunately, and this is something the private sector has learned fairly late too. I mean, you know, as we've all watched the tech news over the past couple of years, we've seen stories about how, you know, insurance companies have discovered that they need a tech department. I'm just like, they just learned this? This is news.
Well, considering
And
they
they're
sell
hiring people from all these tech companies. Yay,
and
the tech
considering
companies
that
lay
they sell
off.
cyber insurance policies, I'm surprised they don't know that.
I know, I'm just saying, like, there's a
They're offered as the compensation to people who have been breached and they're sold or pawned, cyber services.
Yes, they do. Yes, that's true. So, and I'll save this for last, and I will admit that it is an extremely dense bill. But Capriglione has filed what I would call the omnibus data privacy bill. So that is 1844. I have my bill number
HB
correct.
1844.
HB 1844. He's a House member, and it
It would be
purports.
SB if it was Senate.
It purports to be the sort of standard setting and frankly regulatory bill that is required. And I think, you know, most of us who work in this area at all agree that we haven't solved the data privacy nut. Federal government hasn't solved it either. Like, this is an unsolved problem. So I would say that it is early in session. I'm quite certain that there will be a committee substitute on this bill. And what I would recommend, especially to a room full of people like y'all, is to read the bill. Because when I read the bill, I see a few loopholes. Like, I see a lot of pieces of the data privacy puzzle kind of being left off the table. And I understand why. Between healthcare privacy and cell phone privacy and, you know,
Child
law enforcement. And like, this is a very complicated concept. Just the concept, as we all know, of actual consent. So all of these efforts to regulate data privacy revolve around consent. What is it that I've consented to? Did I actually understand it? And of course, most of us are like, oh yeah, I read the privacy policy, blood, you know,
And-
breeze past.
And you know, I'll say, you know, you may be just about to get this, but I'll just add, of course, also wrapped up in consent is, well, is everything you're collecting the minimum necessary to provide the service I
Yes.
want, or have you bundled a bunch of other stuff, but I have to accept all of it?
And that actually is the best part of this bill, actually. I really like that. So there's a section that essentially kind of puts it on the, what they're calling the controller. It kind of creates a position of controller that companies, this is a regulatory bill, that companies are expected to have. And one of the jobs of that person is to minimize data collection, to ensure that the company is only collecting what they really need to do whatever it is that they do. Of course, that sounds great in theory, and we all want that, but in practice, what a company really needs to do what it needs to do may actually be a pretty difficult thing to grasp, right? And so the bill isn't particularly specific. I'm not sure how it could be, but maybe you guys would have good ideas about that.
Well, I will say that I know Steve Perkins, I've been talking with, who may be watching right now, has a lot of good ideas, but I don't necessarily know if I yet have his permission to share all of them in a public setting. So.
Okay, well, what he needs to do is go into Capriglione's office and just talk. Because this is the moment in session when they are listening, right? They have filed these preliminary bills, which is all that a filed bill is. It's step one in a process. And an author like this, who has so clearly said, I'm going to own this problem set, and I may not be able to pass all these bills this time, but I'm going to throw out enough stuff, and then you need to bring me your response, because that's how these bills become a really good thing. And they don't otherwise. Mostly if you don't come and help Capriglione sharpen his bill and figure out where the bright lines should be, it probably isn't going to move, because every tech company is going to have a problem with it in some way, shape, or form. So that is sort of my plea. I'm not going to try to describe the bill. It's quite long and weedy. Yes?
What's the best way to do that, to get suggestions heard?
So the nice thing about being in Austin is that the Capitol is just a few blocks away. So what I would do, especially, if you're just reading these bills and you've got some expertise, I would pick up the phone, call Capriglione's office in the Capitol, ask for the staff person in charge of any one of these bills, but 1844 certainly, and just schedule an appointment. There is probably one staff person whose brain is behind all of these bills. And my guess is, because this is just how things go, is that he's going to expect to be able to pass, creating a director of technology at DIR, or a security guy, right? He thinks he might be able to pass state agency security assessments and getting employees trained, right? So he files all these bills thinking, okay, here's a nugget that I can probably get off the table. Here's a nugget that I can pass. Oh, security assessments, a lot of agencies are gonna be like, that's gonna cost money. And then he's gonna, at the end, come to his omnibus, and this one's gonna be the one that it may take 3 sessions. But the sooner that we start getting those good ideas, the more cooked it becomes, the more it can move each one of those sessions. And so I would suggest just calling that office, scheduling an appointment, telling them who you are, whatever your background is, and saying, I have some thoughts about your bill, and they will just, will guarantee you will get an in-person meeting with the staffer who's probably behind most of this. Yeah.
Yes, I met Gio pretty recently. He seems to be pretty well respected within his caucus and can, get some stuff done. What committee will this go to? Is he on that committee? And I know he does. I know he does energy.
Yeah, yes, that's a really good question. I don't know. I would guess his staff person is wondering the same thing.
So I know that Donna Howard is on some sort of IT committees. I don't know what committee it is also, so I assume we could.
Yeah, I didn't think to try and figure that out before this.
And then two other things. One, any guess who would do this on the Senate side?
Well, it isn't filed on the Senate side
Right.
yet.
Is there somebody directly or not?
Well, let me look and see. So he has, I'm gonna guess Parker, actually, just looking at, so his package, his state agency security assessments, he's got 2 Senate partners. But it looks like Parker is his other kind of consistent partner. And Parker just came over from the House. So my guess is that they have a relationship.
Right, so the opposition to something like this, you mentioned the tech companies, but the moment the tech companies are sort of getting grief from a lot of conservatives and other people with it.
Yeah, they're getting some grief right now, that's right.
So which might make it an easier time to pass this.
I'm guessing
kind of
that
stuff.
that's partly why Capriglione has thought about doing an omnibus privacy bill for a while.
I can say that's true because Steve Perkins has been following this with Capriglione for a while, and actually I have Steve's permission to share some of his thoughts and feedback.
Oh, please, yes.
First, he also says Capriglione is chair of House Finance, and the bill will probably go there. It covers privacy. He also says, so his broad summary is, the bill is very similar to the Virginia Consumer Data Protection Act, which was originally written by Amazon and Microsoft in the state of Washington. In his opinion, it is fairly weak on consumer protections.
Yeah.
And I have
I did mention a few
yeah.
loopholes.
Right. Well, you did mention a few loopholes, and just really, since I have the permission to
Yeah.
share, and we actually have somebody who's quite informed on this issue, I will share
Please
with you
do.
of those loopholes. So basically, there is a section that talks about sale of personal data is the exchange of personal data for monetary consideration or for commercial purposes by the controller to a third party. His feedback is that should include sharing, disclosing, transferring of personal data, since companies such as Facebook will say they do not sell data, but they do provide data to advertisers for commercial purposes.
Yeah, see, that's the kind of thing that I wouldn't probably even catch, so
And then-
I really appreciate that comment.
Sale does not include disclosure of information that the consumer did not restrict to a specific audience. And then his explanation, in other words, personal data obtained from other sources such as social media is fair game for companies to collect, use, and retain if the consumer fails to restrict it.
Yeah.
So, and he goes on for about 10 bullet points that are that thorough, but they're all things like that, where like, that actually is a huge loophole that doesn't say what you think it
Well,
says.
and I would agree, and that's why I say that it's important to provide that input early. And I will just use as an example, it took 3 sessions to pass a bill that simply codified the data privacy U.S. Supreme Court decision on warrants for cell phone location data.
And I'll point out, we still don't have a similar bill from the Supreme Court for ALPR data.
No, we
It's
don't.
very narrowly tailored just to
Right.
cell phone location.
That's right. So a very narrowly tailored Supreme Court decision wound its way through the Texas legislature with a sort of regulatory approach. It took 3 sessions to pass, and it ended up being extremely narrow. Like, it was almost as narrow as the Supreme Court decision itself. So, it is unlikely that this, in my view, that this bill will pass. I don't think we're racing to, get to it before somebody does something to make it worse. I do think that every piece that we suggest to make it better will get a real thoughtful hearing, right? Now, I also would say that my sort of strategic approach to Texas legislation is that better than current law is the like, doesn't have to be a lot better. If it's not worse, then we've done good. This is like the life of deep incrementalism. You know, going back to our sad state of affairs, you know, if we have accomplished something by putting a security guy at DIR, like, that's, you know, it's a baby step and maybe a little embarrassing that we had to do that in 2023. But it's better than not doing it. And every bill should be measured on that
I
scale.
do in large part agree, but I will actually, just because it, you know, as I said, I've been talking with Steve about the Caprigrione's proposed bills on this for a couple sessions now. And, you know, I know one worry Steve has had is that, you know, okay, fine, well, yes, this bill is better than what we currently have, but I know he does have worries that if we don't get this bill massively stronger and it passes, that any appetite to actually get it right will vanish because they'll all just say, well, look, we have a data privacy bill. Why do we need to do anything?
So what I have found, and I understand that concern, and I would say that that there has been a shift on that. It used to be the case that the Texas legislature did something and then it didn't want to deal with that issue again for a decade. That is really no longer true.
Is that true? Not true in general, in your opinion, or
In
just
general.
on hot button issues
No, in
like who should be
general.
in what bathroom? Or
In
something?
general, I think that it seems clear that there is more of an understanding and willingness to grant that no bill passes and we're done. Like, especially with respect to technology. Like the fact that, you know, 20 years ago they thought, yay, we've approved email, we're done, right? No. Email like went by the wayside a decade ago and you haven't done a thing to address anything since. No, that mentality just doesn't work anymore.
You suddenly make me, though, wonder, because I don't think we're quite to the deadline to file bills yet. I think they can still slip in a few.
Yes, but it's very close.
Right. I was just wondering, have you seen anything that indicates somebody might at the last minute? Because it's certainly really in the news, and you said their attitude on this stuff is shifting. Anything related to the recent explosion in AI, or nothing yet?
Nothing yet. That's certainly nothing good.
Well, I'm sure if they
There
propose
is a-
something, it will be alarmist and not informed by how this
Well,
tech
right,
actually
there,
works.
I failed to mention, because there's so many of these ridiculous bills, but there is actually one, a pornography bill aimed at not having AI produce pornography or something. It's very, it's a very
4chan, that
weird
ship's already
bill.
sailed. I don't know what they think they're going to do.
Well, there you go. Yes, sir.
In the online survey industry,
Yeah,
they have a method of assigning a person an ID based on some attributes of the machine that they're using. And
Yeah.
then they transfer that attribute information throughout their industry, or the ones that they share. So they don't know who you are,
yeah.
but they know where you're at.
Yeah,
And
they know where
use
your
that to-
machine is sitting, sure.
Well, maybe not even your machine, you just can't go around, for instance, they like to prevent you from doing the same survey 8
Yeah,
times.
yes, of
'Cause
course.
you get a little bit, you
Yeah.
get pennies for those.
Yeah.
So, and that can be expanded.
Sure.
So are they looking at these, sort of highly specific, but not actually tied to a name?
So, yes, and that gets to another area in this bill where I am not an expert enough to be, like, I should not be left in a room with this bill, because I don't have the technical chops to understand exactly what you're talking about. So the bill makes significant distinctions between individually identifiable and non-identifiable information, and there are good reasons for that.
Although with a little bit of the programmer chiming in, I will say that people are often woefully misinformed about which data is PII and which isn't.
Sure.
People think a lot of data is not personally identifiable,
Yeah.
and it is with a little ingenuity.
Yeah, well, that is, again, there is an effort to kind of lift up and give more protection, as wanting to be protected, which is kind of theoretically the right way to go. But I'm a little concerned that in kind of slicing these two pools, and one we're gonna protect and one we're kind of gonna let fly free, that, you know, without a fairly deep understanding of exactly what you're talking about, the degree to which it is still individually identifiable, it might not be attached, it's uniquely, exactly. It's not attached to a name or a social security number, but it is attached to the person closely enough that you could walk up to their house and shake their hand, like, okay, that's not really gonna cut it.
The awkward truth on all the debates around PII that I never see raised, because of course people want to collect as much data as they can, is that there's been a lot of academic studies that all you need is 15 data points on anonymous people. Almost doesn't even matter what they are, and you've uniquely identified 99.97% of those people.
Yeah, well, that is the kind of thinking that is not, I mean, I'm gonna give Capriglione credit for going and finding a model bill to the point of a bill that passed in another state. You gotta start with something.
And that's how I pointed in New
That's
Hampshire's ALPR bill and all
That's
this
right.
council to listen.
Exactly. So you have to start with something. They started with a thing that existed in the world. They definitely, you know, messed with it. It's not the same, but it definitely also needs additional work. And they aren't, you know, they're not you guys. So you guys can really contribute something to making this a better bill. It's very likely to get a hearing, so there will also be that public hearing moment. But I will tell you that on stuff as weedy and difficult as these big unsolved problems of technology, the very best thing is to set up a meeting, go to the office, and speak to them. And you don't have to represent an organization. You don't have to have knowledge beyond what you actually have. You can bring in the piece that you know about, like how do we, you know, what do these words that seem to separate PII from, you know, non-identifiable, like are these the right words? I know about that piece. You know, you can go in and you can have a robust conversation, and it's very likely that you will go straight into that guy's Rolodex and he will call you the next time he gets a visit from somebody saying something different, or he's changed the bill and he wants to send you the new draft. All of a sudden, you will just be a guy that he calls, because he doesn't have very many of those. And you live here, and if he calls you, maybe you'll just come on over and talk to him again.
I can say from personal experience that, you know, you might, if you're cynical about politics, think this isn't true, but I can tell you it absolutely is, that a lot of politicians are actually desperate to hear from a so-called citizen expert on a particular issue, because they know nothing about it.
Right.
When the ALPR debates were happening with City Council last year, and I spoke to the council for the first time, we only get a couple minutes. The whole council literally called me back 3 or 4 times because they were all like, oh my God, somebody who actually knows how this stuff works.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm kind of on a related point, how much, what do you think is Capriglione's like motivation for introducing these bills? Like, is he someone who's an idealist about privacy and genuinely is like trying to solve this problem, or is he, you know, maybe motivated to ensure that legislation is in place that is not too unfriendly to corporate interests, or?
Well, I would say that Capriglione comes from the more libertarian side of the Republican Party, which are, those folks are getting a little harder to find these days.
But
I would say that he is not going to be liberty interest.
Political
Right.
divide issues often cared about for very different reasons by both sides of the political divide. But it often can boil down to as simple as, I don't want the evil people on the other side spying on me, so they both agree on that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like different ways that you can frame this discussion. You know, like in terms of like, you know, it's hurtful to small business, you know, to have, you know, this information, you know, in centralized gatekeepers for that. And so I'm I'm just
Yeah,
kind of curious.
no, it's
like,
an
what's-
excellent question. I think that you should assume that he and his staff are more libertarian than some offices. And so they come at it from a straight up, less government perspective. On the other hand, he's making a giant regulatory bill that applies to government, so I'm sure there's a certain amount of discomfort there. And he, of course, like, most of the leadership, which he is House leadership, they're going to be pro-business because they have to. Like, I'm gonna assume the best of him, I think, based on having filed so much legislation, so much of it headed in the right direction. I think it's always best to walk in with an open heart and an assumption that this person is just trying to do the right thing. Yeah.
Do you foresee any strong bipartisan support from Democrats on this bill? On the
Yeah.
House?
Oh, yeah. No, this has the potential to have bipartisan support.
I mean, those hacks look bad for everyone.
They do. Yeah, all of this stuff is going to have bipartisan support. I think the issue is making it not get deep sixed and tanked by exceptions and, again, knowing that our goal, like thinking of our goal as get as much as you can, but this is gonna, truly these days, this is a multi-year process. And so you can actually see legislation passed and then come back and talk about it again, and especially in the tech area, because, the world changes. TikTok didn't exist yesterday. So.
And I'm sure there'll be some new scary app the kids are on.
I know, the
and
kids
in
of
another
tomorrow are
5
gonna have a
years.
new thing. Yes.
Now, another industry that's exploding like AI is additive manufacturing.
Is what?
Additive manufacturing or 3D printing.
Oh, yeah, there's nothing on that.
Is there any elements of digital management coming through?
I'm not sure that Texas legislators even know what that means.
I mean, in Austin, we obviously do, because they're doing that experimental, neighborhood, but yeah, I concur
An
with that.
experimental neighborhood, I can't wait to find out about that.
Hey, I live in the 3D printed neighborhood over Musk Company Town, so,
Yes, I'm not aware of any legislation on the many uses of 3D printing that are emerging right now.
So, you can't 3D print guns, but you can 3D print space cannons, right?
I mean, Texas is a weird state where, unlike everywhere else, they might actually be weirdly supportive of 3D printers because you can make guns with them.
Yeah.
Weird, strange bedfellows.
It is true, we do love guns. So.
Well, and as I always say, people love to point at 3D printing guns, but, as I do on so many of these issues, I'm just like, yeah, but to completely stop that, you would have to get so 1984 about it.
That would be like open carry on the fly.
Yeah. Well, I think that's all that I was gonna present today. I know it's a little superficial. If I'd had a little more time to really dig into
Kathy,
1844,
why don't
I
you
would have.
explain why it was an amazing favor on your part to keep your date with us tonight at all?
Right. So I will quickly summarize the City Hall is blowing up right now problem. So in wearing my other hat, when I'm not at the Capitol, I do a lot of work on police accountability here in Austin. And to Kevin's point, there's a lot of areas where we do need to kind of re-embrace some of the enthusiasm for police accountability that we had a bit ago, because there hasn't been the change of culture that one might hope.
Well, when your
So-
city manager
Yes, the city manager
has different opinions
Yeah.
than the citizens, it makes it hard.
Yeah. So anyway, my organization, Equity Action, collected signatures on a petition last summer to stand up an independent civilian oversight system.
And as I said at the beginning, but just to be clear for full transparency, EFF Austin is a co-signer on
Yeah.
the APOA.
Is an endorser.
Yes.
So in brief, the Police Association, unbeknownst to anyone because they didn't disclose this until January, formed an organization called VOPA and collected signatures on a very different version of civilian oversight that had the same name as ours and nearly the same ballot caption. So they've basically created a ballot clone with different content.
Yeah.
So that election is teed up for May. So we're ready for that. It's okay. We're gonna have a ballot measure election, and that will do what that does. But in the meantime, city staff tried to step in front of all of those voters, theirs and ours, to put something together that would preempt the election. The city has tried to force council to sign a contract with the police union that would preempt anything that the voters did in May. And that, whatever happens in May, would never go into effect.
It's very wonky, it's very
It's very wonky,
backstabbing.
it's very complicated. We hoped we would never have to go here, because ballot measures in this town have been a bit sacrosanct. Like, if you get the petition signatures and the voters want to vote, then they should vote, and the council should sit back and let that happen, and then be guided by that vote. So council is firing Spencer Kronk over it.
Yeah.
That is what's happening. The city manager is getting fired.
Now, explain why that's not as good news as it initially sounds.
Oh, I think it's pretty good news.
Well, I do think it's wonderful
I'm
news.
good with it, it's fine.
Well, yes, I, for many reasons, am quite fine to see him going. It's not bad he's getting fired, but the cover it may get
Yeah,
is where
well,
there's concern.
No, I think it's fine.
Okay, well, I'm glad. I'm now feeling more
So
optimistic.
what's gonna happen tomorrow at City Hall is most likely, now, tea leaf reading is always bad, but most likely, they will go into executive session, they will fire Spencer Kronk, they will come back out, and they will vote to ask the city staff to pivot this whole complicated deal that they've been working with the police association, and go back and just do a short-term deal to extend the terms of the police contract through the May election and a little bit after it, so that the voters can vote and they can regroup and do a long-term contract after the election. So that is likely to happen tomorrow. We're hoping, if you want to join us, we're gonna be there. You have to be there at 8 in the morning to sign up. I know, it's brutal.
And they probably won't actually address this issue until 10:30, according to
That's
the email
right.
from the mayor.
You can sign up and then go have breakfast and come back.
But 8:15 is your deadline to sign up in person at City Hall.
Correct.
If you want to speak, the bodies there still certainly show how the citizens feel
Yeah,
on this
if
issue.
you, and basically, at this point, we're very much, this is literally the only thing that they can do to allow the voters to vote and then have something be implemented about after that vote. And, much as I felt like the petition gathering that the police union did in the end of last year was, there was a lot of things said that were not true, like who they were and who was funding them and all that stuff. Nonetheless, I look forward to actually having a debate about oversight of police, because I feel like we're at a stuck point in Austin where, we have all these problems we haven't solved. I don't know if y'all followed the Raj Munasinghe shooting.
That was the tech CEO who
Yes, so
probably
he
was
ran-
high in his house and got
He was-
shot by
he
the
was not
cops.
high.
He was not? Okay.
Oh, no.
Okay. I heard some rumors about that, but it was still
Raj?
messed up what happened to him, even if that was true.
So, he was at his own home, he thought there was an intruder, he got out his gun, but he was facing the house, so he was on his own porch, believed he had an intruder in his house. He did have a gun. We are in Texas, people do that. And he was shot from behind by the police officers who arrived within seconds of their arrival.
What I had
police
heard,
were
I think,
called
was based
to
on some
help him.
neighbors saying that he was acting weird, but they may have just been scared because he had a gun, because he thought there was an intruder in his house.
You're gonna act weird anyhow.
It's
Right.
true.
He thought
It's
there
true.
was an intruder. It's possible he was acting weird. He was trying to defend his home. He was on his own porch, and he was in Bolden Creek. So this isn't like a thing that only happens to poor black people. Like,
It happens to rich
People-
people of color in this city in nice neighborhoods too.
so he ran a company called In Kind. It's a pretty well-known company here in town. And his family is, beside themselves, as you can
And
imagine.
did he had called the police?
His neighbor called the police on his behalf after they talked about it.
And then.
His neighbor called the police to assist him with the intruder.
And when was this?
This was,
Several months ago.
no, it was in December.
Oh, yeah, what time is it?
Yeah, it was quite recently.
Yeah, I remember it blew up a little on the Austin subreddit. But yes, this is such a pro-gun rights state, it's really hard to spin this as an innocent mistake, even if you really try to get it.
I mean, you know, to me, for that segment of the population who believes in defending your home with a gun, I think it presents some real issues. But regardless, what I hope this election is going to do is allow us all to have a real debate around what rules we think should apply and how they should be enforced. You know, what do we expect of police when they drive up on, like, do we expect them to have more information? What information did they have? Well, they had some information. They probably could have not immediately shot him.
And as
That's going to be, and the other thing is that these cases are costing us a fortune.
Oh, yeah.
So this family is unlike many. This family is not poor. This case has a lot of issues. And we have had to pay in this town tens of millions on cases that are increasingly not being protected by qualified immunity. Judges are saying, hey, it kind of looks like you are not actually disciplining your officers for misconduct, so if this is the behavior you think is okay, we're not giving you qualified immunity. We're not going to protect the taxpayers from the liability that you are choosing to have. And we have a case recently where a judge basically said that, and the city lost qualified immunity, and that one's going to cost us a lot of money too. So we're in a place where this has kind of been escalating quietly in the background. We haven't solved the problem. There are ways that you can at least try, and that's what the election's going to be about.
And just to quickly plug for those who, I hope everybody in this room cares about these issues independently of digital celebrities.
And I know
issues.
this is not what I came here to talk about.
But just to say that it is relevant to these issues, even if you don't care about any of that, which I really hope and think you should. But that's my personal opinion, not my EFF Austin opinion. But it does touch digital celebrities issues. As I alluded at the beginning, the APOA specifically has a section that would try to bring greater transparency to police body cameras. This is a major concern because EFF Austin, we were actually one of the early supporters of after cell phone video footage with incidents like Eric Garner started bringing transparency to these incidents. We were early supporters of the idea of police body cameras bringing a tech accountability and transparency. But we've seen that the actual implementation of this in many police departments often leaves a lot to be desired from the stated goal of transparency.
And mostly it's
accountability.
because it's all secret.
That's a lot of
the
it.
purpose of the civilian oversight piece is in part to always have an independent, non-police eye on things that are otherwise secret. And that can help, lift up internally at first, but hopefully ultimately externally as well, kind of the public perspective on how this stuff plays out, because police do have a unique perspective. Yes, sir.
What about this thing where other agencies within the city or organizations can access information, like reports from the police can be accessed like code enforcement or footage from body cams on firefighters or other individuals?
Yes.
I mean,
I agree.
these
Yes.
organizations, these groups cannot go into spots. They use a group that has other, I guess, capacity to enter without
A warrant?
a warrant.
Yeah.
And then they use what is captured to create a case against an individual.
There has been a great deal of controversy about Ring. I'm sure you're aware.
Yeah.
This
This is not Ring, I was swatted by code enforcement for
By
having
code
missing.
enforcement.
Of course it was code enforcement.
Well,
Yeah,
I
because
will
the
say,
police told me
code
the number
enforcement has a certain culture of wannabe cop going on there.
Oh, yeah.
That's my
This
quick
guy
take.
didn't like that I've been
Yeah.
called on for 40 years.
And of
to your
course,
point-
did you have any ability to find out who had like got you swatted, or is that all
The
secret?
police told me
Oh, wow, okay.
in the street, the number came from code enforcement. And
Well,
Wow.
so, yes, so there are other issues than police, and I know sometimes it seems like we're stuck on that issue, which is why I'm looking forward to an election. Hopefully we'll get us unstuck and moving forward.
Virginia,
But-
because as I said, there are so many other issues. Like, as I said, you wanna know what surveillance tech APD owns? Good luck. As I said, you can go look up the purchase request, they say $20,000 software. Like, literally, it's that big.
And we were talking about the Fusion Center before the meeting began. There's actually a public board on the Fusion Center that I think has been underrepresented by tech people recently. I would love to see some tech people on the Fusion Center board.
Was that the board that Greg used to
The
be on?
board that Greg
Well, if you
used to be
still
on.
know
It's-
people there, we'd be happy to see
It's
what
a
it
tough
is.
job.
I'm sure
because-
it is.
And I am on a panel that's supposed to be reviewing police training. It has been like pulling teeth to get to actually see the change. And that is experience, what a lot of citizens experience, trying to like just walk down the road of things that I think most people agree on, like de-escalation and, you know, communicating with the mentally ill and not putting them in jail. And, you know, there's sort of themes that keep recurring. And that's, again, you know, we have to kind of start somewhere. And
What's the Fusion Center?
the Fusion Center,
That's a rabbit hole if you're unaware.
it's a big deal. It's
We
the
actually-
regional,
It's the Austin, the Fusion Center, it's, Austin
regional
Regional
center-
Intelligence Center.
yeah.
yeah.
Or-
It's the
That's what I was
hub
next to.
for data sharing among law enforcement at every level. There's a national network of, in Texas, they're called Fusion Centers, in other states, they have other names, but it's a national network that shares data among different law enforcement agencies
They
and
were
between
created
local
after
and
9/11,
state.
basically.
And, you know, at the time that we had Greg on there, you know, the big issue was the sharing of data over people who were just immigrants.
Well, yeah, and of course, it turned out that Greg and people like us concerns were absolutely right when Blue Leaks revealed that, yes, they were doing all the stuff we were worried about and profiling people because, you know, they,
Yeah.
well, half the time because they were brown, to be blunt.
So there has, again, you know, I think that this town has opened a lot of doors and said, that's a problem, and then not made very much progress actually addressing the problem. And for me, that's sort of true across digital surveillance, it's true with, you know, just simple police interactions with humans, it's true with how these different departments don't work together very well when they're all trying to solve the same problems.
And I guess I'll just do an aside since we're on the topic of sharing oversight things that people may not be aware of. There's another oversight commission called the Public Safety Commission that I've spoken to a few times, specifically about the potential use of LRADs or sonic cannons on
Yeah,
protesters
actually,
trying
you
to
guys had a
use
big
LRADs.
impact about that.
All right, I never got back to me, so
Yeah,
other than that, I know
well,
I put the APD guy in a very awkward spot. I never heard where that ultimately
I think
went.
that you just embarrassed him and they haven't used him since. Honestly, like sometimes you guys showing up can have so much impact.
And nerds have power. I embarrassed it
Nobody-
because I read the manual and showed he was
Yes,
straight up wrong
that's
about how
what he
it's
did.
supposed to be
He read the
used.
manual for this weirdo technology that the police had literally hung on the front of a squad car and then was driving around a protest, and it turned out they were sound waving.
It's a
like-
sound cannon that can literally cause hearing damage and vomiting.
Like
so loud.
an infrasonic,
And it
Yeah.
explicitly says, if APD had read the manual, it explicitly says not for mobile use. Because in a mobile situation, you can't control who is gonna be in the range of the
Well,
sonic.
not just that, it has rules where it doesn't matter if you're not using the super damaging hearing mode. It also straight up says it is never to be used closer than X feet. Well, it turned out the height of APD headquarters downtown where they mounted it is less tall than the distance of like, don't use it within this range ever, says straight up in the manual. So I just pointed that out, and he didn't have an answer for
Yeah,
that.
so sometimes, like, a guy who can read the manual and actually understand what it means, and the chart that shows the audio curve and where it's intense and where it's not, and can actually like translate that into English, can have an enormous impact on how technology is used and misused locally.
Coming
Because
out,
you just
coming
gotta
with data
remember,
and knowing
none
what
of
you're
these,
talking about.
none of these folks are that. You know, you don't become a tech guy by going to the police academy.
And mind you, this was no major trick. I'm no expert on
And
the
it's
rats.
okay,
I
I'm not
literally
being
just
critical, I'm
Googled
just-
the model that they said they
Right.
used and read the manual. I'm no expert on it.
Yeah, I know that ABD thinks I'm extremely critical. I actually feel that I understand that they are not experts in everything, because that's not what the police academy does. And so we all need to just be more engaged, because we all bring stuff that they just don't come with.
Yeah,
And
I
that's
mean,
okay.
if you listen to my testimony compared to like some of the adversaries in town, I think I'm pretty measured too. I just keep emphasizing, look, we just want systems to empower safe practices. Like the fact that people code review my code to look for bugs doesn't mean I'm a bad software engineer. It's the exact same thing.
Yes, sir.
Just, has anything resurfaced on like the homeless, or are they just ghosting on that? That you've seen?
Well, that's not my area.
And unless it's tech related, that is, you know, getting a little off our activism.
All right, well, they have rights too.
Oh, of course
No,
they do. I mean-
I'll give you only like a one-sentence answer, because I actually sat the city's homeless chief of their homeless thing, strategy chief, actually did an hour speech at a meeting I went to last night. They are housing the homeless very slowly at this point, but they are building homes at a faster rate than they ever have, building units
All right.
that people can move into. And so there's been from what I can tell, and she threw a lot of numbers at me, and this is not my area, but it very much sounded like, you know, permitting developers to build units at the lowest income scale is pretty difficult,
Yes.
because it doesn't make them as much money as other kinds of things. And so trying to develop a process that encourages without, you know, doing things we're not allowed to do, more of that has taken longer than one might hope, but they actually do have a lot of housing in the pipeline.
And actually.
And I was heartened by that. I mean, I do understand that you don't develop an apartment complex overnight in this town.
And actually, just to give you something, I absolutely agree, of course their rights matter. Just to give you some information I do have about specifically tech with homeless policy in this town. We actually had, she is no longer the city's chief innovation officer, but we for a while had a woman who I was very impressed with as our chief innovation officer named Carrie O'Connor.
she was amazing.
And she had a really, oh no, she did, smart,
You guys, anyone here
compassionate,
know
knew the
Carrie
issues.
O'Brien?
But she was working on what I thought was a very interesting project to make it far easier for homeless people to safely and securely store their government documents, because of course theft of those is a major issue for the homeless. And so a way for them to securely and privacy-oriented, anonymously, safely, without being spied on by the city, store their digital documents in a way they could not get lost or stolen, so they could access to the essential services they were entitled to. I helped consult with her quite extensively on it and gave her advice, information, hooked her up with people at EFF. I do not know what's become of it since she's no longer the chief innovation officer. I really hope the department kept going with it, because I was very impressed with the thoughtfulness that went into
Yeah,
it.
she did a lot of amazing work, actually. Well, I think that's it for me.
Yeah, unless anybody has a final question for the incredible Gabby.
Yeah, so you guys go out and advocate.
Yeah,
And
get involved.
if you have any questions, if you go try to advocate and you find a barrier or something, tell Kevin and he'll call me.
Yeah,
We'll
you
figure
can
out
contact
how
us
to
on our
lower that
website. I
barrier.
can give you my personal email. But yes, if you have any questions in your quest to be an advocate on these issues, reach out. We're happy to try to advise you and help.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the Texas Ledge needs you.
It really
I
does.
promise.
Because, there are so many lawmakers who are Richard Blumenthal asking, what is Finsta, you know, or series of tubes, Ted Stevens. Like,
Can I
it's
do
not
a
a
quick
joke.
request to find out who you all are, since it's a small group? Can you guys introduce yourselves to me?
We still have 30 minutes, so anybody who
Just
doesn't have
real
a
quick,
privacy
just
reason,
like,
sure.
I'm so-and-so, first name only.
I have no problem with it, but
I do-
anybody can skip if they don't.
I do
want to.
digital video or, you know, something vague.
I guess, David, you want to kick it off?
I'm David. I'm actually an information analyst at the state bar.
Oh,
And I'm on the board as well.
He's one of the
Nice.
EFF Austin board members. He's incredible. I couldn't do what we do without David's work and advocacy.
how about you?
My name is Carmen, I work for FEMA, and,
We always attract the most interesting, impressive people.
it's not that interesting, we just, you know, I mean, it's government.
Yeah,
But I'm actually here because, I was really into the topic, but, you guys have all heard about the outrageous property tax assessments?
No,
That-
yeah.
That
Ouch.
everybody, yeah.
Well, I heard that they're now really high, and of course the market's crashed, and they're still keeping the valuations high.
So there's a lot of small movements throughout the communities, throughout the state, I think. I mean, it wasn't just Texas, it was like the nation, but.
Yeah.
So I just came to maybe pick your brain.
On
because,
property tax valuations, that is definitely not my
Well,
area.
no, it's more like, creating a petition
Oh,
to
sure.
take up. Because,
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Talk
I'm
about
okay.
creating a petition.
Yeah, because it's like, I've heard a lot of families with kids,
Yeah.
and it's like, that's how people lose their homes.
Yes, it is. You're
You know,
right.
that's how it happens.
Yes.
So I
The
don't.
very biggest cause of homelessness is sudden increase in
Mhm.
rent, like that, you know.
And you
Well,
barely made your budget work, and then they messed it
Yeah,
up.
And you don't have 600 extra dollars.
Yeah.
No resiliency. And
Right,
Is there anything out there that they're putting through?
on the cost of housing
I
or
just, no, just like,
property taxes?
yeah.
I've heard there's supposed to be some property tax relief bills. I don't know anything about
I'm
what's actually
afraid I
happening.
did not prep on that. There are a number of property tax relief bills, yes.
There are.
And I actually,
There are.
and I think
But
the crisis.
there's very limited what the state can do though.
Right.
They all wanna hang a banner on
Yeah, there's a way.
Well, and it also, I mean,
No.
Petition 13.
But the fact that they are against a lot of tools in the toolkit, like say an income tax, does make it much harder for them, obviously.
and because so much of it is tied up in school finance, and that is.
Because that's how we fund
That is
schools
a
in the
huge
state.
involvement. So there's a lot of conflicting threads.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's great, yeah, absolutely.
All right, I guess.
I'm Chris.
I know,
Everyone knows who I am.
Chris,
I have semi-retired, I have a lot of little projects, but like, for instance, during COVID, I embedded with the homeless and studied and watched and
wow.
lived with them. I'm even, you know, to the extent of going to the a warming center,
Mhm.
going through that whole process
Uh-huh.
and, you know, feeling the concentration process. There's some very honestly disturbing things about that. And then on the side, I'm interested in additive manufacturing. And one of the problems I'm trying to solve is really fast, inexpensive micro unit housing. Basically whether.
Good human being.
No, that's great. Maybe we can exchange information at the end.
Okay, actually,
Yes.
I don't know who you are.
All right, all right, fine. I'm the current president of the board at EFF Austin. I've been on the board since 2015. I've been aware of EFF Austin's existence since 2013 when I attended a Cory Doctorow book signing, book reading at Book People, and he alluded that there was going to be an after party with some interest. Who am I? So yeah, I'm the current president of the board. I'm not one of the lawyers on our board. We have a couple of those. I basically am one of the programmers, tech people on our board. I'm a senior full-stack web developer at a civic political tech startup here in town. Before that,
Civitech, they just got an
Civitech.
award.
Oh yeah, we just won an award for most innovative startup in Austin. But we're trying to democratize running for political office, basically, make it easier for people with not a lot of money to run for obscure offices at the local level you've never heard of, but impact your life very greatly. Before that, also, as you might have heard, I worked for the Texas Legislative Council. I wrote a lot of the software that moved these bills Kathy was talking about through the legislative process. So, yeah, it kind of makes sense that I also do this. I do it professionally in various capacities as well. That's who I am. You are a new person who reached out on Twitter, and I'm so glad you found us, and I'm glad that my Twitter system seems to work.
Yes. Okay, what is your name though?
Kevin, sorry, Kevin Welch. Yes.
Caleb. I've wanted to show up to one of these meetings for a while. Went to,
Thank you for finally joining us.
Texas A&M, but didn't have the time to drive up here. Finally in town, able to pop in. Work at
See
a
more of you.
networking security startup interested in like privacy, security, networking, environment.
Well,
All of this
if you
is
keep coming, I
interesting.
may ask you to give us a talk about that at some point, so fair warning.
Yeah.
Just care about these issues and wanted to meet people, get involved in the community. Well, we're happy to have you.
Earl Bard, I skipped the last legislative session, but 2017 and 19, I did some advocacy work at the Capitol with EFF, ACLU, and you're in my contact list somewhere, Kathy. I gotta see.
Yeah, but that was when I was doing something called the Texas Electronic Privacy Coalition.
Yes, I got to see
We
good
were
stuff
a
out.
member of the Electronic Privacy Coalition, but I don't think it's a thing.
Anyway, but I'm
No, it's
looking,
not.
I'm happy to go talk to people in these offices. I don't have a particular expertise on anything, but I do enjoy that part of going into the offices and meeting with staff or anyone else.
Well, I will be following up with both Steve Perkins and Haley at National EFF about this big data regulation bill. I will certainly loop you in into those discussions, even if it's just going in to his office and giving our talking points, because that's valuable too.
That's what I'm good at.
Great.
Low-level bureaucrat, that's what I like to do.
Hey, people never get all they deserve. They get the shit done.
Hey, the name's Doug. I don't have any history of activism, but I'm just a software engineer, mobile focused, and just I guess somebody who kind of cares about these issues. I don't actually live in Austin, but I'm in town sometimes. And this is one of those times.
As I said, nobody else in Texas is doing this as far as I know, so,
Yeah. I have in the past, I've been a member and kind of helped run a crypto party in Dallas. But increasingly I'm sort of like coming to realize that giving individuals like tools to kind of to put them in complete control of their own privacy is an increasingly uphill battle that's just getting harder and harder, and it's really I don't think that that's the most effective way to proceed anymore. I think that we really need our legislatures to kind of set fair rules of play
Right.
for companies, because
Guardrails.
because companies they're in a competitive environment. They have to take take every advantage available within the law, and so we need to make sure that the law sets those limits in a safe place for all of us. And so I'm trying to get more involved in kind of influencing things from the law side.
That's great.
well, you basically arrive where we all sit, where we certainly believe in those software solutions, but we do not. So we have, even if it's an imperfect system, we have to care about that, because people believe they have power, so they do have power. And that's just how it is, unfortunately.
And they pass bills and then they become law, so that's power.
Yeah.
That's real.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I don't live here either, but we're from Dallas, and I'm an artist. And I was
Nice.
just here to learn and know more about these issues.
We're glad you decided to spend your limited time here in Austin with us. Thank you so much.
I'm Sean. I have a small transport company in Dallas.
Okay.
I was just interested in some of the information that y'all have, mainly on the gang stalking.
On the which?
Gang stalking.
Gang stalking? Gang
So I was-
stalking. I feel like we haven't talked about that.
No, we haven't. No, we haven't.
Gang
That's-
stalking.
That's what was on the website.
Wait, what did I say we were gonna talk about?
So
What
we
is,
did not.
hold on. Apparently there's two definitions of this word. What's your definition of gang stalking?
Man,
I
I'm
was
not
trying
like,
to
what did I
figure it
tell
out.
people we were
Okay.
doing?
So,
Yeah,
so
I'm like,
the
you can't
traditional
have-
definition is it's the belief that people are targeting you for harassment in very subtle ways. I'm trying to figure out how to word this. Like, for example, you might notice like someone in the bus like keeps looking at you and like texting on their phone or something. Like, that's the traditional definition, but apparently some people nowadays are using it just as a catch-all term for mass surveillance. So that's why I asked.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm
The
just
second
trying
one.
to learn about it.
Oh, gotcha.
I mean,
Well, I didn't know
what
that that's what I was supposed
particularly
to
in
talk
my
about,
language,
so.
Other gang out.
I was.
because if I miscommunicate, I always want to communicate clearly what we'll be talking about. So I hope you still found it interesting, even if it
No, I
wasn't
did
what you
find it very
expected.
interesting. Yeah, no, it was worth my time.
Good.
And now we finally.
Cyber-
I'm always working on processing.
Cyberbullying laws, government, cybersecurity, just some of those things.
Oh, I think it's because I was using the language Kathy originally provided me based on what she was seeing, but we said that some of the bills could include regulating ALPRs, health information privacy,
Oh, yeah, there
cyberbullying
is
laws,
going to be
government
an
services.
LPR bill, it's likely to be incorporated as an amendment into the Capriglio.
We also said potentially cyberbullying laws as well, but maybe nothing has come of that.
I have not seen any.
Well, I think you gave me that language
Well, I
originally when
probably
was
did
asking
because
for
I
it.
thought there would be, but here we are
Thank you
in
very much.
February and nobody
Yeah.
filed any.
Sorry, I didn't explain it well. I
No,
wasn't
no,
expecting to hear that.
very good. It's better than
I
not
guess I
being
hadn't heard
because
the
I just
term
kind of went,
before. I hadn't heard the term before, so I was just
Well,
looking.
I
There is
was
a-
constrained by the realities of what bills have actually been filed.
Fancy
So,
that.
point
But I
blank,
also, as I said, if
Maybe
anything I
not.
said miscommunicate what we actually talked about, I'm all about improving process. I will not take any offense if somebody's like, that wasn't very clear.
Yeah, well, no, it's still informational. I enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
All right, well, I'm.
And finally, because he can't just hide in the back, although maybe he wants to.
My name is Nick, and I guess you would consider me a privacy advocate. I'm really into privacy. I believe it's a human right that everyone is owed, and I just wanted to get involved.
Awesome.
Nick is also being humble. He is often is giving good videography services to our meetups, but he had work.
Yeah, I'm usually on time.
But no,
When I don't get
you
stuff, I
volunteer
need to use
or a
this.
saint, and every time you do, we get something so much better than the live stream. So
Well,
no
thank you for
apologies.
agreeing
Thank
to
you.
let me meet you, because I feel, we should have done that at the beginning.
I might actually,
So,
but I'm happy we're happy from Dallas.
if you're here, you know, we got people who drive down to Arlington all the time.
And I guess I'll say, we hope if you're, those of you out of town, if you're ever in Austin again, we hope we'll see you again. Those who are local, we'll see you. Once a month. Yes, second Tuesday. And also, quick, for anybody who does want to chat a little more, we'll go over to the hotel bar, have a drink, chat for a minute. So if anybody wants to join us over there, have a chat, you're more
And
than
it was,
welcome.
back in those days, it was warrants for cell phone privacy, and we did ultimately get something passed. It's not great, but, you know.
So the end of what is these issues are.
Good, I will.
Well, and Andrew, I'll also say the fights over ALPRs are not over. Certainly, anybody who can go speak to city council members, especially the new council members about the issue, if we can convert enough of them, we might actually win this time.
Happy to do that. Steve.
Yeah.
I've heard that Dave is
I
not.
couldn't tell you what we should be advocating for. Go there.
As I said, just somebody who can basically go there and talk, and I think that's phenomenal.
Well, it's
Don't really even tell my wife about that. That's funny.
it's nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too. What's your name was? Doug. Doug, nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Hello. I like the tattoos.
Thank you.
Very cool.
Thank you.
Are you guys together?
No.
No. I mean, I figured you both just kind of stuck around.
Oh, yeah, I don't know you either.
That's fair.